So today we're here to talk about how to get your clients to stay longer, so client retention. And there are a few things that I've uncovered in my research and on Google Scholar, because there's some research on this topic, and I wanted to share them with you. And I also wanted to just put it out to you guys, because many of you have been in the industry for some time and probably already have some strategies that you've tried, and maybe some of them have worked and maybe some of them haven't. And so, like, yeah, what are you already doing / what do you already know about this topic? Like, what's working for you? What have you tried that hasn't worked, maybe, in terms of keeping your clients longer? Dan, I'm going to call on you because you're usually not too bashful, and plus I know you've got a studio. So,
yeah. Well, I've been a studio owner for just over a decade now, and we've tried lots of different things, and most of them don't work. So all the kind of little gimmicks, like giving discounts off of long-term memberships, that sort of thing, didn't work for us or for me, and I've tried that several different times. The one thing that we've got at the moment is we've got a club, and it's something that gets awarded to a member rather than they don't buy into it or anything, and it's just a recognition. And it's simply that recognition of all their work that keeps them coming back for more.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Tell us some more about the discounting the long-term memberships. What did you do there?
Previously we had a problem with cash flow back in the day. And so we were trying to encourage people to have more classes per week. And so we'd end up discounting. So if they had a weekly membership, they'd end up getting because we were trying to get them to come 2 or 3 times a week, because that's what Mr. Joe said. We would give them a discount off that third class.
Uh-huh.
But we found that half the time people wouldn't use it, and it just wasn't a popular option, and it had no impact on our client retention whatsoever. Mm-hmm. Zero impact.
Okay. Jennifer says, I SMS each client each week. Each client responds almost immediately to my message. I mention something they've done well and affirm them in their journey. Nice one, Jennifer. And great to have you with us. And hi, Bo, and hi, Kayla, and hi, Arlene. Who else has got something you want to share with the group? Beck.
Hey, guys. So my studio setup is probably a little bit different from the average. I facilitate one-on-one Pilates sessions. But how things are set up at my studio, which is Tropic, basically is that all clients have their regular weekly session. So their same time and the same day is set each week. So they don't have to rebook. So there's actually no rebooking period unless someone needs to reschedule. So it's only if they have to reschedule do they get in touch and say, hey, this time won't work out for me this week. Can I change it to a different day? And then I provide them with other options that are available. But other than that, the expectation is already set that time is theirs, which they love, because then they know that they can come and, come to the same time every single week, not have to worry about it being booked by someone else. But they get that consistency in their practice and they can plan their life around it. So I have found that is amazing, because I know how many clients are coming and when. I'm not sitting there waiting for bookings every week. I get that it is different from a group studio, but yeah, for me, that's worked for client retention. And I think just that thing of people feeling that kind of exclusivity of like, oh, that's mine, that's my session. I think people like that. And yeah.
I think that's awesome. I think there's another aspect of that stands out to me, which is just the default choice.
Yeah.
And I've read some research on, and maybe some of you guys have read it, in some of the same books I've read, but, things like some national government, I can't remember which country, but they were trying to increase the number of people who opted into become organ donors, when they get their driver's license. And what they found was when they changed the form that people had to fill out when their driver's license from default, check this box if you wish to become an organ donor, to check this box if you don't wish to become an organ donor, it went from like 5% of people opting in to something like 80% of people opting in, all of a sudden. the default situation, if the person didn't take action, was they're an organ donor. And I love what you've set up there, Beck, because the default situation is your sessions on Thursdays at 4 p.m.
Yeah.
And if life gets in the way, what happens is that session remains in force.
Yes.
Whereas if they forget to book it or something, it's like, that I really love the way you've set the default setting there. That's their session forevermore until they actively change it.
Yeah, and it's also a little bit different as well, because I guess the average studio sends a reminder as well, and the reminder would be coming from me personally. Okay, so I don't actually remind people. I sort of say to them after their first session, setting up that expectation, like, oh, just letting you know, pop it in your calendar. This is your session. I won't wait. Don't wait for me to confirm it with you or anything like that. Just, come to the door, same time every week, I'll be here. And I feel like if I had done the opposite, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like if I sent a reminder every week, it would potentially prompt people to make a decision of like, oh, maybe I actually can't make tomorrow. Whereas, yeah, that definitely what you said, Raph, that kind of default setting means that people only get in touch if they need to change something.
Yeah, love it. Who else has got something you want to contribute?
I'm similar to Beck in that I've got a small studio, so three people to a group down on the Great Ocean Road. So I'm similar to Beck. I've got a lot of regular customers, so they've got their clients, they've got their regular sessions. I only run classes 3 days a week, so Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays, and that's their spot. So the only time and I've also got a waiting list, so the only time I kind of send a reminder is if I've got a bit of a thing like, they might not be coming. I've got a feeling they're not coming and someone else wants that spot. But otherwise, that's their time every week. And if they go on holidays, I just fill that spot until they come back so they never lose their spot. Yeah, so that sort of makes them feel, more committed as well and with more of a personal touch. And I text them personally, often, not too often, but just to check in with them and see how they're all going. Yeah, so that's how I work as well. So I think that works really well for me as well.
I think that's awesome, Andrea. And Beck said, maybe what she does doesn't apply to groups, but in my experience, it definitely applies to small groups, like 3 or 4 people. When you develop a real regular, stable group, actually the group becomes friends if you do it right. And they actually then don't want to let the other group members down by not being there, because like their friends who they train with every week are expecting them there. And so it's like, I don't want to let the girls down, So even though I don't feel like going today, or in the best case, I've had small groups where they all arrive together because they've been out for coffee beforehand or something, like they're socialising together, and that becomes a real reinforcing element. And I haven't really seen that with larger groups, like, groups of 10 or 15 or 20 people in a MAT class or a reformer class, but definitely in 3 and 4 groups. I think that's a real factor, is that stability in that regular sort of same group they kind of develop social bonds with.
I've had it in a bigger group where we a bunch of us became friends and would always go to the same class. I even became somebody's birth partner as a result. So it can happen, yeah.
And I guess that would be easier to achieve if you had something like a series, like a 10-session series where you bought a semester or a term pass or something where everybody signed up for 10 weeks on Tuesdays at 4 p.m. or something, rather than just a casual thing where people can book into any class and change each week and stuff like that. Amanda, did you want to say something?
Sorry, I'm using a new device. I have to work out where things are on the screen. Totally agree with the routine is really important, but also just to be, as the owner / instructor or leader of the team, to be incredibly tolerant, even if you don't feel incredibly tolerant when people cancel. Since starting using the booking system a few years ago, that's actually been really good because people get a reminder. It makes people think ahead. Oh, that's right, I've got Pilates tomorrow, but I've also got the dentist, and sort of plan ahead so that they're not just texting you 10 minutes before class, sorry, I can't make it today. Having the capacity to slot that extra person into the class as well. So I reckon I've got probably about maybe 80% of people that stick to the routine, but there's a few floaters because of shift work and so forth that will pop up into various spots, and just to enable that to happen is really good. But also now having a couple of instructors who are so enthusiastic has definitely been a big plus, getting people enthusiastic to come back because the instructors are so enthusiastic. It's just been wonderful. That's
good to hear you say that. Anyone else got anything you want to add? Vicky, you've managed studios. Do you have any light to shed?
Yeah, look, I think a lot of it comes down to just creating a connection with the people. When I was teaching, most of the years I was teaching small groups, and I just found that finding out each individual person's goals and then making sure I meet and exceed those goals tended to help them stick around. And in terms of a big group class, too, I just personally, my style was to try and connect with people individually, like walk around and, just give them little cues or say, "G'day, how's so-and-so?" And that seemed to work for me. But like you've mentioned previously, there are also instructors that don't do that and just give a kick-ass workout and exceed the client's expectations in that way. And that seems to work great too.
Well, I think I agree with you on both of those. Like, I think that comes back to something that we talked about a little while ago, but basically, and this is a story I told a little while ago, but basically when I go and get a massage or a haircut, I will choose a practitioner based on the fact of whether they talk at me or not. I don't want to talk, I just want a haircut, please. And so but other people I know are the opposite, right? They love to engage socially and that's a big factor for them. And so I think you're just hitting two different groups of people there. Like, some people really value that engagement, and that's really of prime importance to them. Other people equally value the absence of engagement. It's like, yeah, don't talk to me, please. I just want to work out, So I think that's, there's no hard or fast rule there. But I think being consistent one way or the other. So if I came to your class this week and you don't talk to me, and I'm like, oh, awesome, I found an instructor who doesn't talk to me. That's awesome. And then next week you're all chatty, I'm like, oh. And vice versa, right? If I come to your class and you're like super warm and friendly and remember my dog's name and all of that stuff, then the next 3 weeks you don't say a word to me, I feel there's I don't feel like I can go and rely on, I can't look forward to that interaction because I'm not sure if it's going to happen or not. Anyone else got anything you want to add?
Actually, I have a question about charging for late cancels. Like, people that were talking about how their clients have a regular spot every week. If they don't show up and don't give notice, do people late cancel? And if they do, does that affect their retention?
I can say how I do it, Vicky. I'm not saying I do it perfectly. And it's definitely been a bit of a learning thing. I think it was Amanda before who said be, incredibly understanding and tolerable of people in those situations. So one thing I found is you want people doing the session, you want people moving. So it really is the thing of, if people are cancelling and they are having problems committing and not staying consistent, continuing to charge them late cancel is not necessarily the answer. You want them back in, so that I'm very flexible with rescheduling clients. So I take my sessions Monday to Friday, and then I always have, usually I can find a time slot to reschedule people in that, period. Or I say, because I don't usually have regular sessions on Saturdays, I say, otherwise you can, come in on a Saturday and reschedule your session then. No shows, honestly, unless I kind of personally know that person has something really, quite stressful going on in their life. And in that instance, I will say to them, it's kind of on an individual basis. I do it a little bit more flexibly than other places because I don't have a booking system. It's people contact me and we have that discussion. So I do have that flexibility to kind of make these decisions on the fly. So in some instances, I will just say to the person, look, if you feel like within the next week you have the ability to reschedule, would you like to do that over being charged a late cancel? That's if I have the ability to do it. I don't always have the ability to do that. But otherwise, a no-show, I've done it before where I've been incredibly understanding because of things like floods in the area and that sort of stuff. And then, I've not charged a no-show thinking, I give the benefit of the doubt. And then the person's just said to me that they slept in. And then that made me feel honestly really shit. And I'm like, that's not a pattern I can consistently have because me as a trainer I'm going to get resentful. So if the person thinks that they can, I don't want to say it, but like get away with just not showing up because they slept in a little bit, you don't want that habit to continue. So I've been trying to get more strict with my cancellation policy recently. So, that stuff doesn't happen, but it is, for me, I found it a touch and go. I don't think what I'm doing is perfect, but I definitely think that the answer is think about it long term. So for one-on-one sessions where it's just me and the client, I want the person to be coming in. I want them to be moving. I want them to be feeling the benefits of Pilates. And if every now and then that means being super understanding and being a bit more flexible and just human, honestly, just understanding that people have things going on, that could be the difference between that person feeling seen and heard and like someone understands them and that they've got, a nurturing place to go to and that they don't have to be embarrassed and then not show up next week, whatever it might be. But there have definitely been situations that I know that if I had have been really, really strict with it and not kind of considering that human factor, I would have lost clients. But at the same time, I have also been way too lenient with some people and it's sort of, made me a little bit, get that yuck feeling where you're like, oh, I feel like I'm kind of being taken for a ride here. So I don't have the perfect answer, but that's me.
Jo.
Hi. So I'm speaking as an instructor, not as someone who owns a studio. And just on the point that we're discussing about what do we do with late cancels or people who accidentally sleep in and things, a lot of my classes that I happen to teach are the group reformer and mat classes. And whether I have the online element going or not, I always film my classes, film them where they're facing me or where I might roughly in the studio. That's a little bit for myself work. So I actually go back and a lot of the time watch my classes to see sort of how I'm going in my own teaching. But then I also have it there in case, life happens for a client or I do get that moment where someone slept in or something's gone crazy with kids being sick. So they're still being charged for the session, but I'm able to actually upload and send them a link to the class as well. And, they won't be seeing the other clients in there and they'll be seeing me if I'm demonstrating, or they'll see a blank spot where I was as I'm walking around the room with everybody else. But at least they still get to participate. So for me, that's one way that I'm able to offer something to those clients when they just have life moments, but they can still sort of stay involved.
Something I'd like to add here is my experience as a studio owner, and we taught one-on-ones and we taught small groups, and we also, about 90% of our revenue came from large groups of reformer, mat work and yoga, like I'm talking like 18 to 20 people in a reformer class, is that when you move away from one-on-ones, like what Beck's talking about, and you move into a group situation, actually the person's behaviour doesn't just affect themselves, it affects others in the group. So we had a lot of resentful clients saying like, well, my friend tried to book into this class and she couldn't get in, and now I come in here and there are 4 vacant reformers, so what's the deal with that, And if we say like, well, a couple of people just didn't show up, and they're like, well, I hope you're bloody penalising them for not showing up because my friend would have paid you money to be here, and that's been a real inconvenience. And so I think, with a larger group situation, it's not just the person who's late cancelling or no showing that you have to consider. It's actually the effect on the group and the message that sends to the other clients about what you value and what you'll tolerate. And also then if you then ring up a client and say, oh, look, you didn't show up for your class, so we're just going to charge you for that. They're like, well, hold on. Every day when I show up, there are 3 empty reformers, right? So, and I know that class was waitlisted. So, how come you're charging me? Because I don't see you applying that rule evenly to everybody. So I think, my experience was that once we decided to, cringingly take a bit of a harder line and be very consistent in enforcing that cancellation policies, it worked much better for all of the clients. Like, at the start, there were a couple of clients that were like, whinge, moan, complain, oh, you never charged me before for being late sort of thing. But then when we just said calmly, like, well, we're applying the same rule, we have to apply the same rule for everybody. Everybody gets the same treatment. It's the same rule for you, it's the same rule for everybody else. And pretty soon everyone was like, yeah, I can see that's fair. Like grumble, it's inconvenient for me today, but I can see that on another day when I'm the one who wants to get into the class and I can't get into it because somebody has, taken my spot, but they haven't showed up. It's like, well, that then benefits me, when the boot's on the other foot. So I don't know. I can't recall if we lost any clients because of it, but I think you can definitely lose clients if you don't have a good cancellation policy. You lose the good clients who do show up. They're the ones you lose.
Raph, we moved to an automated booking system so that the students, the clients, had control of their bookings, and it had a strict 12-hour cancellation policy. And basically everyone knows and understands that they've got 12 hours, and the system automatically deducts a class from their package. We have the ability to go in and credit it back. So, I mean, like if someone's woken up and they're vomiting, I don't want them in the studio. That's fine. But as a general rule, it automatically it deducts their class for them. So and we have 0 arguments, and we don't have many cancellations now. So that's great.
I like that you've set the default. The default is we charge you, but if there are special circumstances, we'll,
we can credit it back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've also got that default position with the booking system, which has worked pretty well. I think that in these COVID times, it's kind of muddied the waters a little bit, because I feel that if people wake up and they've got a sore throat, before COVID restrictions, you wouldn't really care, but now we actually don't want them here. So I feel that I have to give them that class. Most people are pretty good. Some people, a very few would probably milk the system. And then there's a few that I've actually been teaching before I had the studio here for maybe 12 years that actually say, sorry, we can't come in 2 days' time, but please, take that class from our booking, no need for that. But what we've done is we've made known that if they let us know, even if it's at short notice, we've got people that they'll get their class back. So if we can fill their space, they'll get their class back. And that's also really helped.
Mm. We also found at my studio, we were in the central business district, so there were people, sort of nipping in at lunchtime or straight after work or whatever. We found that actually we started out with, we tried different cancellation windows, 24 hours, 12 hours. What we found actually was 4 hours was the best for our particular population, because of the their usage patterns and what time of day they were coming and stuff. It's like what would actually happen was, a meeting would come up in the, they'd be booked into an afternoon class, and then at 9 o'clock in the morning, an emergency meeting would be called at work, and they wouldn't be able to make their lunchtime class or their afternoon class. And so they needed, they'd ring us up straight away and say, hey, sorry, I can't make my class this afternoon. But like they wouldn't know 12 hours in advance, that they were going to miss it. So that create that, and because we had a population that were working within a couple of blocks of where we were situated, with 4 hours notice, people could come in off the wait list and go, oh, it's only 5-minute walk. I can be there to take my spot on the wait list. So that worked for us. And I think depending on where you are, if you're suburban or a bit more remote, you might need a longer cancellation window. But I think you might need to just experiment with different lengths, or even what we did was just polled our members and said, hey, here are the options we're considering. Which one do you favour? Bearing in mind that you might be the canceller or the cancellee, on any given day. And overwhelmingly they told us they wanted 4 hours, and when we implemented 4 hours, actually things went a lot smoother. Well, I've got a few things that I would like to share. Oh, actually, sorry, there's something else in the chat from Melissa. Melissa says, a trainer I see makes me want to go every week because she incorporates the things I request into the class she designs for me. She's always checking my goals and updating them as they're achieved. I think that's really important, Melissa. So a couple of things that I uncovered. So there is this thing called, where are we? Something that I found, it's called IHRSA 1 Million Strong. And IHRSA is the International Health Clubs and Racket Sports Association. And they're a US-based organisation, but they're basically the sort of industry body for the health club industry. So the sorts of people who would be members would be Equinox Gyms Proprietary Limited and 24-hour fitness. So they're not sort of like they're for big sort of health clubs and stuff. And they did this study in association with Light Fitness, and I think it's with Gallup as well, in 2015. And it's called 1 Million Strong because they surveyed 1 million members across health clubs in the US. So they got incredible statistical power in their data. And what they did was they got information from a whole bunch of health clubs' databases on member behaviour and all different, whatever data points they had on these members, and then tried to correlate each of those things with how long they were a member for. So they looked at, gender, age, geographic location, how much they were paying, frequency of attendance, stuff like that. And what they found was that there were basically, of all of the variables that they had, and there were some important variables that they weren't able to measure, like customer satisfaction and things like that. But of all the variables that they had, there were only two things that were correlated with how long someone stayed a member of the health club. And the first one was age. And so people 44 years or older were significantly, like probably about 30% more likely to stay in any given month compared to someone who's younger. And the second thing, which was by far the biggest predictor, was the length of the initial contract period. And so basically in the US at that time in health clubs, the practice was to sell membership. So you wouldn't sell like a 10 pass to your Equinox Health Club. You would sell a 1 month membership or a 2 month membership or a 6 month membership, whatever. And so what they found was people who signed up on a 1 month membership stayed an average of 15 months with the club. Whereas people who signed up on a 12-month membership stayed an average of, guess what? If you had to guess, 35 months. And I just want to show you the graph here. So here is the graph. You guys can see that screen, yeah. So here is the graph of, in the top right, that's by gender, right? So males and females. basically the same, right? And if you look down the bottom right graph, that's retention by age group, and you know it's a bit small to make out on this screen probably for you, but that top line there, the purple line, is the 45 to 54-year-old age group, and so they are retained longer. But you can see it's not like a dramatic effect, right? It's not super dramatic. But then we look on the next page, left-hand graph, retention by payment type, right? And that top line is the 12-month memberships, and the bottom line is the 1-month memberships. And the scale on the left side here is the percentage of people who are still a member, and along the bottom it's how many months. So you can see basically that top line there, those 12-month membership people, you know, a few of them drop off in the first few months, but basically then once you get to like 12 months, they stay. They stay and they stay and they stay and they stay. And what I hypothesize is the reason for that, because I've thought about this a lot, is that so people who buy a 12-month membership, then at 12 months it kicks over into a month-to-month open-ended agreement, right? So after 12 months they can cancel any time they want, but they don't. They stay and they stay and they stay. And the only reason this stops at 36 months is because that's how long they follow them up for, right? So they probably stay a lot longer than that. So what I reckon explains that is if someone who walks into a gym and says, yeah, it's 10% cheaper for a 12-month commitment, I'll take it, right? That's somebody who is so confident that they're going to use it that they're like, oh, well, that's easy money for me to save, right? Because I know I'm going to be here anyway, so why would I pay the higher price, right? So whereas somebody who's like, well, I'm not sure if I'm going to follow through with this and I can get it for a little bit more, I can get just a month-to-month thing where I can back out anytime I want, well, that is attractive to that person. So it's not the fact that you lock them in, it's people who are not frightened by that commitment because they're already mentally committed to doing an exercise program. They're like, well, I'm going to be exercising the rest of my life anyway, right? I might as well pay a bit less, and I don't mind signing up for a 12-month thing because I'm going to be here for decades. So by incentivizing people to have that 12-month commitment, you're going to attract more of the right people. So I think, I think just to really hopefully be as clear as possible on that, I'm not suggesting that you should not allow people to sign up for a 1-month thing or not offer 10 passes or anything like that. I think you should definitely offer those, low commitment options. But if you also offer a 12-month option that is significantly cheaper than the month-to-month option, right, and I'm going to suggest like 10 or even 20% cheaper, then those people who are like, are ready to commit because they are sold, that will be attractive to them. They won't see any downside to that. Whereas the other people will see a downside to it, and so they'll take your 10 pass or your 1 month, rolling membership, and they'll gladly pay a little bit more for those options. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Sorry, I just wanted to ask, because I've actually been thinking about this recently. I've seen a lot of people with setups like mine, and they've moved to the direct debit weekly model, as in you're paying for a weekly membership. And I would love to know other people's experience and opinions on it. I just know how much people reschedule, and sometimes that rescheduling can be like doing 2 sessions in a week instead of, and missing a week and that sort of stuff. I'd love to know whether that kind of model has worked for people in a one-on-one or small group setting. I know it's very different from a group setting, like really different. But that could kind of tie into what you said, Raph, of offer that as a cheaper option, and it is billed each week, or have the flexibility of the passes. Currently, I do passes. Mm-hmm. Does anyone have any feedback on that? It's been something that I've been sort of, mulling over in my mind.
We do both, Beck.
Yeah.
We have class passes and a weekly membership.
Yeah.
The benefit of the weekly membership for our point of view, because we've got about 300 active students.
Mm-hmm.
What it means is that we had less of it kind of flattened out our cash flow chart a little bit. So we got a more steady cash flow week to week, which was important for me when I started hiring teachers, to make sure I've got a definite, rather than spiking every 5 weeks or 10 weeks, what I used to have, which was fine when I was operating by myself, but I needed that cash flow to be steady. So the class passes allowed that to happen.
Yeah.
I think, Beck, my view on this is that, and my experience is that, if you have a clear and fair cancellation policy and you clearly communicate that to new clients, right up front and say, hey, here are the rules around here. And just so you know, like, we are pretty strict on them, right? And the reason we're strict on them is because we have the same rule for everybody and we need to be fair, right? And so to be fair, we have to apply the rule equally to everyone.
Yeah.
And so you know what you're getting into, and we've had the chat and you've asked any questions or whatever. And then number one, you just don't get the cancellations, like Dan said, because they know the rules and they're like, oh, I'm going to cancel. Oh, yeah, but then I'll have to pay and whatever. And they're like, maybe I will cancel that appointment and go to see Beck instead, like I promised I would. And then secondly, if they do cancel and you charge them, they don't get cranky about it, because it's like, well, they knew that was what the rule was, right? And so it's hard making the transition from having a really loose policy to having a tighter policy. And my advice, if you did want to go down that route, would be give plenty of notice. Say, hey, look, in 30 days or 60 days or whatever, we're going to change our policy. Here's the new policy. Here's why we're doing this. And it's not just because so I can make more money. It's like to be fair to everyone, right? Because people try and book in, then I'm fully booked and people can't get in, but then the people that booked didn't show up, and I could have seen those other people who really wanted to come. And so I'd like to be fair to everyone, to give equal access to everybody. We're going to create this cancellation policy, which is the same for everybody, and it's going to be applied equally to everybody, and it's going to start on this date.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Love chatting this out.
But then, it's hard when you have to be the one to apply it, right? You have to be the one that rings them up and go, yeah, well, I'm sorry, I'm going to charge you for that session, sort of thing. It was much easier for me because I had some poor receptionist who had to ring them up, But it was okay for the receptionist. Well, it wasn't totally okay, but they got to be the good cop. They got to be like, yeah, I know it's really unfair, isn't it? But Raph's a bastard. He makes me ring you up and, do this. So, if you could invoke some kind of fictitious, business director or something, it's like, oh, look, I'd love, I agree with you, and I think it's, I'd love to let you off, but my business partner is a real bastard, and they really make me be super strict on this and I can't get away with it. So, yeah, if you could invoke some higher authority, that makes it easier.
Little dog Darla, she can do it.
Any other thoughts on the 12-month commitment?
The only thing I would say, Raph, is that it could be, in our studio, that could be tricky to price, to figure out the price of that, simply because we offer different classes and stuff. So how would you set that up?
Well, without knowing what you do, but you mean you offer something like a yoga that's one price and Pilates that's a slightly different price or something like that?
Yeah, we have reformer classes and network classes, and our average student would do 2 to 3 classes a week. So they would split it up, maybe 2 reformer and a mat, or a reformer and a mat circuit, that sort of thing.
All right. So, well, in terms of pricing memberships, my view is that, lots and lots and lots of data from my own studio and a whole bunch of other studios and research I've seen says that the average, member comes somewhere between 1.7 and 2.3 times a week, right? So the average person, out of your group, exercise situation. And so people might come and say, I'm going to come 4 times a week or whatever, but it's like, no, they're not. They're going to come twice a week, right? And on a good week, they're going to come 3 times. And then you ask them, how often do you come? They go, I come 3 times a week. It's like, yeah, no, you came 3 times a week, twice in the last year. and you came once a week 5 times, and the rest of the time you came twice a week. So people actually don't come as often as they think they do, in my experience, and they don't come as often as they think they will, as they predict they will. So, but a lot of people know this about themselves. They say, "Oh, I think I'm going to start out in a blaze of glory, but I know myself. I'm probably only going to come once a week. Therefore, I'm going to get the 10 pass, right? Because that's more flexible, and that gives me the option. If I don't come, I don't pay. So that's good, and that works for that person. So I would say, in my experience, if basically the way we always sold this was, if you're going to come once a week or less, if you want to come once a week or once a fortnight or once a month or whatever, buy a 10 pass. Because it's flexible, you only pay what you use, right? And if you don't come 1 week, fine, you don't pay that week, And if you come twice, then you pay twice. It's real easy, it's flexible, right? But then if you're coming more than once a week, right? If you're coming twice a week or more, the membership is more economical, right? Because you can come up to 4 times a week. In our case, it was 4, right? And if you come 2 or 3 or 4, it's like you don't pay more and more and more, right? But it's only more economical if you're coming twice a week. If you're coming once a week, it's actually cheaper for you to do the 10 pass, right? So that's what we would say to people. We'd get out the price sheet and go, hey, look, how often do you think you're going to be coming? If it's once a week, here's what I recommend. If it's more than once a week consistently, here's what I recommend and here's why. And they would just then self-select, I think I'll take the 10 pass, or I think I'll take the membership sort of thing. And we would also comb through our once a month or so often, we comb through our attendance records and just look for people on 10 passes who'd come 8 times in the last month. And we'd say, we'd bring them up and say, hey, Dan, I noticed you came average twice a week in the last month and you paid this much per class. If you'd been on a membership, you would have paid this much, which is less, right? Would you like me to swap you over to a membership and credit the rest of your 10 pass towards that membership? And a lot of time people go, oh, yeah, good idea, thanks, I appreciate it. You're trying to save me money here. And in terms of like pricing it, I think in terms of pricing like reformer versus mat work, I guess it's a conundrum because, your reformer's got a hard limit on how many people you can fit in the room. Like in mat work, you can always squeeze in one more, just squish the mats a bit closer together, or whatever. But in reformers, like, not many, you're not going to say, okay, yeah, 2 of you share that reformer sort of thing. So, reformer's got a hard limit where mat work is kind of a bit more soft. Depends on where the space that you're doing mat work and how much you're thinking, you're charging. People will pay more normally for reformer. I reckon, in a perfect world, if you could create a space where you could fit more people in a mat class so that you could generate roughly the same revenue from a mat class, even though there's more people in there, then that kind of equalises things out. And you could just say, hey, your membership is good for mat and reformer, just come to as many as you wish. And it'll even itself out because I'll find it's easier to get into mat because there's more spots. And they'll go, you know what, I would love to do 3 reformer classes this week, but they're all booked out at my favourite time, so I'll just go to a mat instead, And so that'll kind of iron itself out in the wash, and then you can just charge one price. That'd be my kind of starting point. Make it nice and simple, one price. All right, so that's the 12-month thing. But I think it's really important if you do choose to offer that option, that you also offer the 1-month membership and you also offer a 10 pass, because then people get to choose, do they want to pay a bit more for more flexibility, or do they want to pay a bit less for less flexibility? Just like when you buy an airline ticket, right? You book further in advance, you get it cheaper. You sacrifice the ability to cancel at the last minute and get a refund, you get it a bit cheaper. Does someone have something you want to add?
Raph, what would you do with people that are like, want to do the yearly membership, but we're going away for 3 weeks? I can just hear clients going to go, what happens for those 3 weeks we're away?
We did you can freeze your membership for, I think we used to do, you can do 4 weeks a year freeze for no charge. But that's not 4 weeks out of the 12 months. That's like, that extends your membership by 4 weeks, right? So it's literally on freeze. So if you take a 12-month membership and then halfway through it, you freeze it for 4 weeks, well, it's going to be 13 months, right? Because you owe us 12 payments, right? 12 monthly payments is what you're committing to. And so if you say freeze it, it's like, you still owe us 12 monthly payments. You just spread it out over 13 months. So we found that was no problem. And then we said, you can freeze longer if you want, but there's a charge. After 4 weeks, there's a $5 a week charge or something like that. And it still extends your membership route, right? So if you freeze for 8 weeks, the first 4 weeks is free. The next 4 weeks is $5 a week, but it still extends your membership. So now you've got a 14-month membership, right? So that $5 a week is basically for us to keep your membership warm for you. And, we found that wasn't a problem, All right. Well, a couple other things I found. There was something. Now, a bunch of you mentioned like customer service and customer satisfaction at the start, and that is definitely something that showed up in the research not in this URSA report, but in some research I found on exercise adherence and retention. And so what I found was that customer satisfaction, not weekly usage, predicts retention. So if you look at your roster and go, these people are coming 5 times a week and these other people are coming once a week, that doesn't tell you how long those people are going to be with you for, which surprised me. But I guess when you think about it, what they're saying is that people who are more satisfied are more likely to stick around regardless of how often they attend. And if you think like, okay, that person who comes once a week, maybe that's that total high point of their week and they wouldn't miss it for anything, right? And, they will move mountains to make sure that they can, keep doing that. Whereas the person who comes 5 a week, maybe they're like, starting a blaze of glory, or they just come 5 times a week because they happen to work 50 metres away, and if they move jobs, now they're 100 metres away, they'll stop coming. The frequency of attendance doesn't necessarily indicate their level of commitment. So, I found that interesting. Any thoughts on that?
Sorry. I tend to think also, Raph, that often people think that they'll come more often and they don't. And once they start missing their, say they think they'll be here for 4 or 5 sessions a week, and once they miss a few, they actually just peter out.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And also I think sometimes people do the value calculation. I think, okay, if I come 4 times a week, it's, $7.50 a class or whatever. And then a couple of weeks, I only come 3 times. I go, oh no, now I'm paying like $12 a class. What a ripoff. And so then they're like, I'm just wasting my money now. It's, I'm not getting my value. So yeah, I think that might be part of it too. Another thing that the research turned up is that, so customer satisfaction is very important. And so that talks to, what a bunch of you said at the start about like finding people's goals and meeting their goals and, personally messaging them and, all of that stuff. But also the research found out that employee turnover predicts client turnover, because what happens is the clients become attached to these staff members, whether it's the receptionist who smiles at them and remembers their dog's name, or whether it's the instructor or, whoever it is. And then that staff member goes and all of a sudden this new staff member comes who doesn't know them, and the client feels like a stranger in this studio that they've been a member of for 3 years maybe. And all of a sudden the staff member's going, oh, hello, madam, the change rooms are that way sort of thing. And the client's like, well, you young whippersnapper, I've been here for longer than you. And so, and also there's no continuity of service then, right? So the person, that instructor who remembers all of your little foibles and which reformer you prefer and which, that you don't like to be touched on your leg and all of those things. And then the new instructor comes and they don't know any of that stuff and you've got to train them up again. You think, oh God, can't be bothered going through all of that again. So I think that's really important. And for those of you who have employees, and when you think about, I used to way back when, I used to think of like receptionists as just they're kind of like the work experience kid, not very important, but actually in the client's eyes, they're super important. They're like a really important point of contact there. Yeah. So that's, and for those of you who are instructors, that I think all of us who have owned studios kind of know this intuitively, right? I mean, if a popular instructor leaves, your numbers are going down, right? That's a thing. And so if you're a popular instructor, guess what? that gives you massive leverage, you know, in any conversations with the studio owner about, you know, your working, you know, conditions, you know. So, because losing you is a very real risk. Yeah. The final thing that I found is that when it comes to you know, spending effort and time on you know, building your customer base, it's actually easier to get, if you're in a health club situation, maybe not for Beck because she probably doesn't have this problem, but if you're in a more of a larger situation where you've got sort of more of a turnover of people, so you've got new people coming in and you've got old people going out the back door sort of thing, it's actually more cost effective most of the time to spend $1 trying to retain a client than it is spending $1 trying to acquire a client, because generally it's more expensive to acquire a new client. You know, you have to spend more on advertising and whatever it might be compared to retaining an existing client. And so this one study, what they did was they looked at members who had recently lapsed, or not recently, members who had lapsed their memberships. They basically stopped coming and then cancelled their membership. And then they offered them a whole range of different like incentives to return. And what they found was that the most effective incentive was, guess what? A discount. Okay, so, you know, 50% off your first month back when you re-sign, sort of thing, you know, that type of thing. 50% off your first 10 pass when you rejoin. And they also found that the most recently lapsed members were like 10 times more likely to return than the ones who lapsed, say, 6 months ago or 12 months ago. Right. So if you were to have somebody who's like starting to fall off the bandwagon and you notice, oh, so-and-so hasn't been for 3 weeks, okay, or so-and-so hasn't renewed their multi-pass, or so-and-so just cancelled their membership a month ago, okay, well, if you were to just reach out to that person and say, hey, you know, haven't seen you in class, I noticed you cancelled your membership, or, you know, see you didn't renew your multi-pass, I miss you, I'd love to see you back, I'm not sure what's going on for you, I'd love to hear about it, but because I'd love to see you back so much, let me shout you 50% off, okay, your first month / your first 10 pass / you know, whatever, when you know, if you come back within the next 2 weeks. You know, and what you'll find is, according to the research, that will reactivate a surprisingly large number of people. Yeah, that's all I got. Oh, actually, no, I got one more thing. This was, I did a whole review of systematic reviews of exercise adherence about a year ago. And basically, there are two things. There are two things here. That one relates to which clients you try to attract, because certain clients, like we said at the start, people who are ready to sign up for a 12-month membership are probably more ready to commit and likely to stay for the longer term, right? And so what this research found was people over 35 years old, people who are active, people who are not motivated by weight loss, but who are motivated by hypertrophy, so they're like muscle growth, health, and aesthetics. So this was for gyms, right? So they're talking about weight loss and muscle growth. But those are the people more likely to stay, right? So if someone comes to you and says, I'm here because I want to lose weight, that doesn't mean they're not going to stay, but it means they're less likely, statistically, less likely to stay. Whereas if they say, hey, I want to tone up, or I just want to be healthy, or I just love being active and I love doing this, they're more likely to stay. Whereas the worst profile, the people who are more likely to cancel, are aged up to 25 years, so 25 or below, never engaged in physical activity before, motivated by weight loss, and not motivated by hypertrophy, health, or aesthetics. So, and there are reasons for that, maybe because younger people tend to be more transient, they tend to change jobs, change houses more often and stuff, so they might, move on. Whereas people in their late 30s, 40s and 50s, they've got a mortgage, etc., so they're going to, be more stable. And the final thing is something that you can, so that's about like selecting who you market to, basically. And then the final thing is something that you can do as instructors. And what this study looked at was, this was to Scherer et al. 2012, and what they looked at was motivation and how that related to adherence. And what they found was at the start of an exercise routine, people are more likely to stick with it when they have very kind of extrinsic directive instruction. So the instructor's telling them, do this, this is how you do it, right? Do step one, now do step. The instructor's very directive in what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. But very soon, after the kind of initial beginner phase, people become much more likely to stay when you do the opposite, when you give them more autonomy and support their ability to self-direct, right? So what that suggests is, with brand new beginners, you need to be more directive and say, okay, here's exactly what I want you to do, when I want you to do it, here's how many classes you should come to, da-da-da-da-da. But then pretty soon, after just a few weeks, you need to start being more autonomy supporting and saying, okay, you've been coming 4 weeks now, okay, how are you feeling about this? Do you think twice a week is the right number for you? Or would you like to do a bit less or a bit more? You've been doing the beginner variations now. What do you think? Would you like to keep doing the beginner variations, or would you like to progress a little bit? So start to support their autonomy and offer them spring choices. Whereas beginners, you might go, okay, put on this number of springs. After a few weeks, you might start to say, well, what do you think? You've been here a few weeks now. Is this the right spring setting, or would you like more or less? Would you like me to give you more feedback or less feedback? You can just give them basically any choice. But things that support their autonomy are going to statistically enhance their retention as well. Yeah, so that's what I got for you. I think we've got just a couple of minutes left. So if you have any questions or thoughts on that, I'd love to hear it, or anything else. All right. So what did we learn? I'm just summing up mentally here. We learned that customer satisfaction is important. It's good to set the default setting that they keep coming rather than the default setting they have to opt in. They have to make the default they have to opt out. I think we agreed that having a firm cancellation policy is a good plan and enforcing it for everybody, although maybe it was just me who agreed on that. I'm not sure. We said that having a stable group can be really valuable, whether it's a small group or a large group, because the group members they feel kind of engaged with each other, and they feel kind of a sense of obligation to show up for the other group members, not even for the instructor. We said that stable staffing is really important, because when staff members leave, that discombobulates the customers, and that customer satisfaction is a more important predictor of people staying or going rather than how often they come. So your efforts at retention shouldn't be aimed at, and I think this is what a lot of people do, shouldn't be aimed at trying to get people to come more often, but rather should be aimed at getting people more satisfied with however often they are coming. And then they'll stay longer, and then you won't need people to come more often because you'll have more people, and each of them will be coming the right number of times. And we also said that the length of the initial commitment, so if people on a 12-month commitment are way more likely to stay much longer, so more than double as long on average. And when you think about, somebody paying a $50 a week membership, them staying it was an extra 20 months on average, right? Times $50 times 4.33 weeks, that's like several $1,000s difference, like more than double the value in that client. So if you discount that 12-month membership by 15 or 20%, you're still like 80% ahead of where you would be by selling them a 1-month membership and them cancelling after 15 months. So from memory, and then the older folk, over mid-30s or older, are more likely to stick it, and people who are motivated by weight loss are less likely to stick it. And when you are more directive at the start and then more autonomy supporting fairly quickly after that, that enhances retention. Did I miss anything? Is there anything else that we covered? All right. Well, I hope you found this useful. I learned a couple of really good things, and I look forward to seeing you again in a week. Hope you have an awesome week.
Thanks, Raph. Love that.
Thank you, Raph. It was great. Thank you.